It's Charlene Lee, and today I'm going to be talking about leadership and how it's changing because of AI. And actually, it's been changing a lot because of different technologies, but I think right now, in this particular time, with AI coming into the zeitgeist, so to speak, being adopted and used by so many people inside of organizations, it's creating a particularly new challenge for leaders. So that's what I want to talk about today, which is how is our leadership being challenged because of AI and how do we respond? So, if you're listening live, would love you to share what leadership challenges you're experiencing because of AI. I would love to hear about them as part of my research. And also to just talk about some of the approaches that I've been working with organizations in developing a coherent strategy and leadership approach to especially the new generative AI and large language models that are now available. So let's get into this. So, what's so particularly challenging about AI? Well, the first thing, it is happening so incredibly quickly. I don't know if you've noticed, but just since November, when ChatGPT came on board, again, AI has been around for a long time. We were covering it at Altimeter with Susan Ellinger, who's now at Microsoft, for since early on, since about 2010. So it's been around for over a decade, AI and big data and all the things it could do with it inside an organization. Uh, but the fact that OpenAI put a chat interface and made AI conversational and therefore accessible to everybody, it basically democratized artificial intelligence. So mere mortals like you and me can actually use these powerful tools. And as a result, people are walking AI into organizations. They're using it to draft emails, to figure out and prioritize, to summarize a bunch of articles, to take transcripts from meetings and filter them out into the key learnings. And people are using this constantly all the time. And so this has eclipsed again the level of control that IT typically has had on AI being experimented with, explored inside an organization in a thoughtful and strategic way. And it's just pouring in through all corners of the organization. So, this is a real challenge for leaders because oftentimes, as leaders, we need to know what's going on in our organizations and to manage the risks as well as the opportunities. And when it's happening at such speed and at such breadth, and at such scale, it's really difficult for us as leaders to understand what is going on. So, would love for you to, again to share just some of the real challenges you're seeing. So, the key one that I'm seeing is that leaders are having a hard time just putting their arms around all of this. And how do I think about this? This is very different from managing anything I've ever had to in the past. In the past, I could see something coming from far away, maybe do some experiments with it before anyone before our customers or employees have really caught on. This is one of those situations where leaders are basically just trying to catch up. So it's also extremely complex because it's coming in at all levels and throughout the organization right away. You don't have the luxury of experimenting with this just in IT or just in marketing or just in HR or in sales or your customer service department. It's all happening at the same time. So what happens is if one area is being impacted by and being advanced in AI, it has ripple effects to the rest of the organization, which is again is tightly orchestrated from an operational point of view. So how do we think about this? Well, one of the things I've been looking at is this complexity leadership theory, CLT. It's a body of thought around how do you manage complexity. And one of the biggest tenets of complexity management and leadership management is that you have to have adaptability to deal with complexity. Kind of makes sense, right? But the problem is that most organizations are not built for adaptability. We're instead built for one of two things. We're built to, for example, being able to have operational excellence and being able to make sure everything happens, protocols being followed, processes, policies. And on the other side, though, we know change is needed. So there's an entrepreneurial side of things where people in the organization are focused on doing things better. Now, in most organizations, that is fairly ordered. It's a strategic process, it's highly thought through. There's a first, second, third, and fourth things that we do. And now that's all being thrown out the window because everything's happening all at once. So, what I want to talk today is about how do you create that adaptive space, this place which sits between the operational and the entrepreneurial, which is exactly what's happening right now. We're having a mismatch between what the operational side can absorb because the entrepreneurial side of the organization, all these employees walking AI through the back door, is off the charts. Everyone is trying to use this, trying to figure out what's going on. And the problem is that the operational part is having a hard time to catch up. I'm trying to catch up. So, wanted to talk a little bit about some of these things, but I have a great comment here from Laura Melbourne. She says, not everyone is receptive to AI. There are stories of misuse of internal data that becomes part of the shared AI knowledge base. The challenge is change management and guardrails to use it to assist the employee, but not give away competitive advantage. Laura, thank you so much for that comment because it is exactly what I want to talk about today. Many cases, leaders are simply saying they're throwing up their hands, going like, "Well, just go for it, try it, experiment, see what happens. Try to stay safe." But we're not giving very many guidelines to our employees to say what is safe, what can we do, what shouldn't we do. And you're pointing to a very specific thing where internal data, proprietary data, competitive advantage data may be leaking out and be used to train the AI, let's say very specifically chat gpt, and it incorporates that information back into the responses. So you really don't want that to happen. ChatGPT recently just added some new controls where you can go in and actually turn off the fact that you're saving the chats that you have, the history of that. And when you do that, it no longer saves the chats, but it also doesn't use the information and take it back into the AI and use it to train the AI. So it's a very important thing to be aware that that's there, that you click that button, that toggle, and turn it off. So it's in the settings. It's pretty easy to find if you go to Chat GPT, go to settings, and you'll see it right there, data management. So that's a really important thing. But more importantly, it's how are you using these tools? When are you using them? And how do you create those guardrails again? So I'm going to talk very specifically about that. So let me get into some of these things. First of all, when we're creating this adaptive space, one of the, again, theories behind complexity leadership theory is that you need to create some reasons for this to happen. And what we're seeing with AI is that there's tremendous pressure just coming from employees starting to use it. Other times that pressure may come from customers wanting the company to do things, greater demands. It could be from competition, it could be economic situation, public policy, even demographic changes. And again, technology just changing, like AI coming into the company and demanding to be used and thought of. So the problem is that when all of these things are happening, this entrepreneurial aspect is happening, it's really tempting to just put a clamp down on it, to just tell everybody, stop using it. And that does not work because there's true, real value being created by all of these tools. So it's really hard to put that genie back into the bottle once it's out. So here are some of the ways that I think leadership needs to be changing. And it has been true, and I've been studying this for many years now, over a decade and a half, about how leaders need to be dealing with all of these disruptions. And one of the biggest issues is that we think as leaders that our job is to manage and reduce risk and conflict, and that our job is to go and just maintain the status quo. That's true if you're trying to be a manager of the status quo. But leaders actually create change. And that has always been the case. And so when you're creating change, this is much more about managing this really dynamic tension between the entrepreneurial side and the operational side. You want people to be entrepreneurial, but not be so entrepreneurial that things are not coordinated, that things are flying off the wheel, that things are breaking down and causing chaos. So it is a really interesting dynamic tension that needs to be created by leaders to create change, but also impose order so the change can be integrated back into the operational system. So, one of the most important things I find that leaders have to do, and this is especially true right now, when you don't know all the answers. And this is really hard because as leaders, we were advanced and promoted in our jobs because we had the answers. People could come to us and they could reliably know that we would tell them, "Oh, you don't know how to do this? This is the way to do it." In this world, especially with things changing so quickly with AI, there's no way we can have all the answers. So we need to shift from being the all knowing, knowledgeable leader to one person who has a lot of curiosity and is asking great questions. And the reason why questions are so important is that they help us define what our objectives are going to be and also help us define what the boundaries are going to be. To Laura's point, what are the guardrails going to be? So asking questions about, well, what kind of risk does this create? How are we making sure that our IP is being protected? What are the opportunities that we can create with greater customer engagement? How do we do this better and faster, not just cheaper? So these are great questions to ask that help set up a common objective for all of these entrepreneurial efforts that are happening. So if entrepreneurs are going here, instead of telling them stop, give them direction in terms of the objectives and outcomes you want to see. Make sure that they stay within boundaries to stay safe and reduce risk. And otherwise, let them go for it. And this goes back to this entrepreneurial side. A key part is about centralizing. So the first one is reducing and managing, shifting from reducing and managing conflict to actually creating tension. The second area is making sure you're asking questions instead of having to have all the answers. The third area is to decentralize and give up the need to be in control. This is really hard for many, many leaders because we're used to being in control. But you have to ask, were you ever really, truly in control in the first place? And the reason why decentralization is so important is that that's where this entrepreneurial life can really begin. And you can see all the efforts being made by people who want to see solutions to real problems that these new solutions could actually address. So, a good example, I was looking through the research, and at one financial services institution, the call center was allowed to be very entrepreneurial. And they had a goal of enhancing and improving customer satisfaction. So they loosened all the protocols for local employees, gave them much more agency and being able to make decisions. They experimented with huddles on a regular basis. They had formal shared team coffee breaks all at the same time to share best practices and learnings. And they made sure that there was instant messaging going and collaboration going in between teams so that they could learn from each other. And the result was a 25% improvement in average handling time for calls. So we see this happening over and over again. And the key reason why this is important is that instead of trying to centralize the entrepreneurial efforts, trying to figure out what works at a central level, you're giving it to people closest to the problems to solve those problems. Again, asking the right questions, being able to come in and talk to people about what our overall objectives are, create those guardrails, then let them go. See what happens, see what's created. And yet there'll be some tensions happening with, well, this is where we've always done things, is what people often say, versus a new way to do things. The leader's role, again, is to make sure that there's an opening there to say, well, let's give it a try. Let's see if it actually works. As long as it stays inside of those guardrails, people in charge of operational excellence, let's give it a try. So I think that part is extremely important. But if you're going to decentralize, then it's really important to centralize transparency. And what I mean by that is making sure that everyone knows what everyone else is doing. And this is the biggest change that I've seen over the past 10 years is that we have these enterprise collaboration tools now that make it so much easier to share, to collaborate, to make sure that if you're doing something, everyone else knows, so that there are fewer, not necessarily all of them are gone, but fewer unintended consequences. So that is a really important part for the leader too, to say that if you're going to try something here and experiment and do these entrepreneurial things, then we need to know about it. We need to know what works, what didn't work, so that the rest of the organization can learn. And then we can move it into the operational excellence part of it as soon as we see things working. Again, decentralizing is a key way to drive up that entrepreneurial aspect of it, but transparency back and therefore accountability back into the centralized operational models is absolutely key as well. And then finally, the last thing I would say is this whole area of thinking about what works, what doesn't work. And this is basically the whole idea of failure. I find that most organizations and most leaders have a terrible relationship with failure. And yet, when we think about what really is standing in the way, it's not the act of failing, it's actually the shame and the embarrassment that comes that's associated with not having been successful. So, one organization I worked with, I was talking to the CEO, and they just said they tried everything to not fail, and they just decided to just not fail anymore because every time they quote failed or perceived that they were failing, there was this shame and embarrassment, and it just was a terrible feeling. So they decided that anytime somebody started feeling bad, they would really examine, why do you feel so bad? What is going on here? Why are you feeling bad? Because we shouldn't be feeling bad because we didn't fail. We set an objective, we got this far, but look at how far we came. We're so much better off than we were when we started. So we're here now. We may not have gotten all the way to the goal, but we're so much better off. This project is not a failure. It's a great success. You are not a failure, which is a key thing. And we can continue moving forward. And this allowed them to set really big, huge, audacious goals because the goal now wasn't to always be successful. The goal was to move from where we were before to get advancement and to get better at what we were trying to do. So, those are the key things that I wanted to talk about today. It's primarily how do we think about leadership changing this AI space? I want to give you some very, very clear specifics about how to deal with this. First of all, as you find people are using AI in the organization, tap into your network engineers, understand what sites they're using for AI. Are they using Midjourney? Are they using ChatGPT? Find out which departments are using this the most and really prioritize the places where there seems to be a lot of activity because you want to get a handle on what's happening and make sure that those guardrails and those objectives are very clear in those areas. And then it's really about setting up that adaptive space, making sure that this really interesting tension is going to be there, encouraging people to experiment, to be entrepreneurial, but then also having these guardrails and making sure absolutely that you're having that transparency and that accountability to make sure you're capturing what's working, what's not. It sounds really simple. In many ways, the scripts and the practices to do this are pretty straightforward. But in reality, this is so difficult to do because we have silos, we have people protecting their turf, we have middle managers asking, well, what happens to us? Are our jobs at risk because of these new technologies? So it's fraught. This space is fraught with lots of difficult conversations. And I think it's important for us as leaders, especially leaders hoping to drive disruptive change, to be able to have these tough conversations, identify where they need to be done and created and had, and to have the integrity and the strength and the vulnerability to open yourself up to all of these conversations that need to be had. It's hard because we don't have the answers as leaders. I'm studying and looking at the space, and I feel like every day I wake up in the morning going, there's something else I have to learn now. It is shaking a lot of the things that I do to my core, the way I do my research, the way I express my expertise is all being challenged because of these new technologies. And yet I'm extremely excited because it's challenging me to rise to a higher level standard of what good looks like. So that's what I have today. This is a quick topic, but I think also one that merits some attention and also to think about how is all of this being challenged? Our leadership concepts of what it means to be a leader being challenged. So next week, I'm going to be talking about a little bit more about AI, and in particular, how artificial intelligence and human intelligence are the same and very different. One of the biggest challenges right now is defining what intelligence looks like. And in particular, this desire to understand how do we harness and develop the different types of intelligence that are coming out and being created by AI, and also to be aware where are the places where the artificial intelligence could actually be much better than a human intelligence, and also what are the places that we as humans need to double down on to make sure we're leading the development of AI in the right directions. I'll definitely talk about emotional intelligence and creativity intelligence because we always kind of hold dear that, well, a machine can do all these computational things, but we humans, we're always going to be more creative. We're going to always be more emotional, empathetic. Not necessarily the case. So tune in next week and we'll be talking about some of these challenges to our various intelligence, and then also exploring what it actually means to be human ourselves. Okay, thank you so much for joining me. Again, would love to hear your challenges when it comes to leading in the AI era, and we'll talk again next week. Take care.